Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 9th of June, 2021, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, myself, Brian Gerrish.
Well, this is the first post Vimeo live stream, so hopefully everybody will be able to watch it successfully.
Well, the chief executive name I can't remember, lovely young lady, but a global leader with the
Yes.
World Economic Forum. So presumably we trod on some toes. Well, where do we start today? We'd just like to remind people that there's a spread of a uniform. We're calling it the vaccine fascists in black. Of course, on Monday, we put up Matt Hancock. He was looking particularly attractive here with his interesting salute. And let's follow that with a reminder that the same black has come in for Boris Johnson. He likes to be seen in his all-encompassing black face mask. And you've got a few more, Mike, that you've spotted.
Yes, of course, the G7 starting on Friday, but these are the G7 Sherpas. I take it you've heard that term before with respect to international
Bag carriers.
Yes, bag carriers. So these are the G7 Sherpas. These are the personal representatives of the G7 world leaders, and they have arrived in Cornwall for ahead of the G7 summit in order to make preparations. So, of course, G7 is starting on Friday. That is leaders from UK, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, United States coming together for the summit. And what are they talking about? Well, vaccination, vaccine passports, and the Green New Deal, of course, are the main talking points. Well, data collection and surveillance is certainly part of this. A massive security operation in place, 1,000 police staying in a cruise ship docked at Falmouth, and 5,000 more in various other places, including in a bunch of what they describe as RVs, which are currently parked at on which RAF base was it? Can't remember, but Culdrose, yes. So near Newquay. So preparations fully on the boil. But what kind of impact is it having on the local community? Well, this for a start. Falmouth businesses have to close for 16 days, according to Cornwall Live. They are going to be compensated, Cornwall Live claims, but the businesses have to close. And if any business that has to close hasn't heard anything by now about compensation, they have to contact the Foreign and Commonwealth Office immediately.
I was fascinated by this as to why these businesses had to close. Is it because the coronavirus is loitering around those businesses in Falmouth?
No, it's nothing to do with corona at all. It is purely to do with the security operation, because the G7 is taking place in 3 locations, and one of them is the National Maritime Museum in Falmouth, and so they've got to shut the entire town down.
But that tourist attraction has been open, I believe, up until now. So,
well, I'm sure it's getting a
full clean.
Clean, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, there's more to come.
Yes, but don't worry. The fact that Cornwall is having to lock down and effectively become prisoners even more than during coronavirus. Here is a post from Facebook. It's been revealed today the policing bill alone for G7 summit will be £70 million. Now, it's not clear from the Guardian article that's linked here whether that is just for the policing aspect of this, or whether this includes the Ministry of Defence part of it as well. But we'll come on to that in 1 second. There was a photograph went with this particular Facebook post. So you've got big concrete bollards, big concrete blocks holding up fencing along the front of people's homes. Now, my understanding is that the fences were supposed to be put along the back of people's homes. But unfortunately, the organisers didn't want the VIPs to see the fences, so they decided to put the fences in front of people's homes instead. Yes. Well, anyway.
Okay, Mike.
So there is an economic cost. There's also this cost, but then there's the military cost as well, because, look, one of the policy areas that we've been watching very carefully over the last couple of years has been this drive to merge policing functions, civilian functions with military functions. So it's a militarization of policing and other institutions. So the Ministry of Defence is stepping in to assist with the security operation. And, well, a couple of tweets here from various people. We've got Matt on the left here I think the Americans have arrived, and we've got a couple of Osprey sort of semi-helicopters there sitting on the ground at St. Michael's Mount. And on the right-hand side, a load from Penzance. Looks like the US military are patrolling the area ahead of the weekend's G7 summit. Here's 2 of the 3 Osprey hybrid helicopter planes that have just been flying to St. Michael's Mount. So that's going on, but we've also got other material being installed, a mobile radar installation of some kind here. So the Ministry of Defence are providing a range of capabilities, including naval vessels, aircraft, planning staff, logistics support, facilities, and explosive ordnance disposal teams. The armed forces, according to the Ministry of Defence, have vast experience in supporting events of this nature and will help the local police force to maintain security for the many visitors to the area and the local communities. And at the request of Devon Cornwall Police, they say the Ministry of Defence is providing explosive search dogs and handlers who'll be under police command. Explosive ordnance disposal teams are on standby as they normally are. And they will be making available RNAS Culdrose and RAF St. Morgan. And they will also help the police to secure and maintain security for the duration of the summit by providing air defense capabilities. So I'm not sure whether this particular mobile radar installation is somehow linked to some kind of air defense capability. But thanks to Patrick for sending that to me, because he was given that by, I believe, a fisherman.
All right. I wonder, looking at that second time, Mike, whether that actually might be a site for launching drones. I wonder whether that white strip is a little.
Well, I don't know, but the mainstream media had a different image of that installation, and they did describe it as a mobile radar installation.
I'd love to see the documentation as to what the risk assessment is, but we've got enough troops and police in Cornwall to seal it off and defend it, presumably against most of the Russian army. Whether Putin is going to come across and grab the leaders from Cornwall, have an ice cream at the same time.
Well, they're certainly expecting something, because I should mention that it is in fact the Commander Littoral Strike Group that's sort of managing this or commanding this, and of course this is formerly Commander Amphibious Task Group. So I'm not sure whether they're planning to do some kind of Normandy landing type exercise on the beach at Carbis Bay. But anyway, the question is, well, what do we think it might happen to homeless people while all these illustrious leaders are going to be there? And the answer is, well, they're being moved out of the hotels and the temporary accommodation that they are currently in. So this is Disc Newquay, which is a charity helping homeless people in Cornwall. And they released a press release this morning, was picked up by various mainstream media, basically saying that people that had been living in hotel rooms under short-term sort of rolling contracts have been told to leave. Now, Cornwall Council is claiming that this is because of seasonal issues, that it's because of the amount of tourism that's going on. But this particular charity is saying absolute nonsense to that one.
And just add to that, Mike, that a week ago I was told by an extremely nice lady working with homeless people in a particular big city that they were in a very bad position because all of the government money that had been provided at the start of the COVID nonsense to get homeless people off the streets, they'd used that money to completely remove homeless people from the streets in that particular city, and they were in good accommodation, and the city was very pleased with that. Well, of course, the government has now withdrawn that funding, and the city was left with a pretty unpleasant task of saying to the homeless people, we're going to have to throw you out because we can't afford to keep this accommodation going. So it appears if you're homeless, you can just be kicked from pillar to post, whether the government's got a financial problem for that or the military is in with the police to protect the world leaders.
Indeed, but here is the world leader, of course, President Biden. He was tweeting this out yesterday. Tomorrow I depart for Europe on the first foreign travel of my presidency. The trip is about realizing America's renewed commitment to our allies and demonstrating that democracies can both meet the challenges and deter the threats of this new age. Did you know we were in a new age?
I think I did. I think we're in the golden age is where we are. We can have a discussion about what the mindset of these people is, but it's pretty dark.
Yes. So anyway, what's he up to? Well, he's arriving in the UK today. Tomorrow he meets Boris. and of course, that's all about renewing the special relationship. Then he's taking part in the G7, of course, from Friday until Sunday. But after the G7 ends and Sunday afternoon, he heads up to meet the Queen. Then on Monday and Tuesday, he'll be in Brussels at the NATO summit, and then in Switzerland on Wednesday, Brian, to meet Vladimir Putin. So I can't imagine what might come out of that.
Well, possibly this, which was sent to us. Now, I've only just been able to have a quick look at this particular article here in the Global Times, but the nub of this is being quite widely reported now. But basically, Putin said publicly that as far as he's concerned, he thinks that the USA is walking the Soviet Union's path, and it's doing it with great confidence. Now, he isn't being nice here. What he's actually saying is that if he takes a look at America, what he sees is an empire that is now starting to collapse because internally the country's no longer working. There's huge fractiousness. America's strutting the world stage, but not doing a very good job of being the world policeman. And Putin says, when I look at the conditions in the USA at the moment, the fact that the government does not seem to be capable of governing the USA, he's effectively saying he predicts that the United States is going to collapse. And there's a lot to be said for that analysis when we look at Biden's administration and where they're going.
I don't think it's just the United States that's in that position either. But anyway, coming back to Cornwall, then everybody will be glad to know, including, I'm sure, all the homeless people that have been thrown out of their accommodation, that Boris has decided to give Cornwall some money. And of course, money going into Cornwall has had lots of success in the past, hasn't it, Brian? Maybe you'll have something to say about that.
Well, the 321 Objective 1 funding disappeared,
That's
literally.
£321 million.
Yeah,
Yes.
320 million pounds disappeared, never to be seen again. And UK Column many years ago put out a challenge that if anybody could show us the accounts for that money, we would be extremely grateful. But I don't think anybody has ever seen the full audited accounts. So money just disappears like water.
Indeed. So let's see what Boris had to say. As the eyes of the world look to Cornwall this week, not only will they see an area of outstanding beauty, they will witness a region that is innovative, exciting, and looking firmly towards a bright future. As the world builds back better from coronavirus, Cornwall will lead the way. So how's it going to lead the way? Well, they've announced some town deals for Penzance and Ives and Camborne, worth over £65 million. And that's going to fund projects at the heart of communities in some of Cornwall's most deprived areas. That's going to include creating a new network of foot and cycle paths across Camborne, Penzance, and from St Ives to St Earth. Community hubs, including theatres, sports clubs, and historic buildings are going to be restored. So this is all good stuff. They're going to sustain businesses by shutting them down for 16 days, but they're going to sustain them. And they're going to sustain businesses in commercial sectors most badly hit by coronavirus. And they're going to create new business hubs in the towns. And these are going to create long-term sustainable jobs. And then they're going to reverse the decline in biodiversity by turning 21,000 hectares of land, probably mostly farmland, into nature conserves and woodlands. So it's all very good stuff, Brian. Money well spent.
Well, don't forget Prince Charles helping to bring in supermarkets to Truro. That was a big popular measure down in Cornwall. But all of the fishing industry absolutely destroyed, farming destroyed. A lot of the temporary jobs that the young people in Cornwall depended on, those have all been destroyed. So it's basically an area wrecked by both the Conservative and Labour government. And mentioning Labour, probably time to bring Gordon Brown onto our screens. And here he is. Now, we're going back a bit here because this is 2014, and a much younger Gordon Brown was calling for Scotland to unite towards a common purpose. And I think this is a subject that we need to bring back to people's attention. So there was Gordon speaking out. And we've also got this one that we found where Gordon was talking to the Labour Spring Conference in March 2008. And we have a little bit of video clip here. and it's fascinating to listen to what he was saying back then.
So I'm only standing here today because a previous generation fought for education for all, demanded an NHS for all, dared to stand up for a common purpose, opportunity for all, and in their generation unleashed the power of opportunity to change lives. So generations don't just have fashions and soundtracks and icons. The generations that history remembers have ideals that inspire them to action. They have dreams that drive them forward. And people don't just write great new chapters of history if they stand frozen or fearful in time and place. They write great chapters of history when they come together in common purpose, emboldened by hope. And now it is our turn, the turn of our generation. And what will we be remembered for? I want our children and their children to say that in the first decades of the 21st century, there lived a generation that built a Britain where the talent you had mattered more than the titles you held. Imagine if together we built a Britain where what counts is not how high up you start, but how high you can reach. Imagine if together we can build a Britain where every parent of every child born today can watch them as they sleep and dare to believe that nothing is beyond them realizing their potential. Imagine if together we create a Britain where for all of us, the future is not a fate we can't escape, but a common purpose we create together. This Britain of security and opportunity for all is within our grasp. So with the courage of our convictions, with pride in our common purpose, let us go out with confidence. Let us go out with confidence to meet the world to come. Let us embrace this new age of ambition. Let us build the Britain of our dreams.
Well, let us build the Britain of our dreams. Some people have said in our chat box, the man is waffling, he's full of bullshit. Perhaps it was neither of those two things. Perhaps he was talking about an agenda, a common purpose, which he absolutely knew was coming, and he knew the form of that agenda, which would be the move towards a world government system with people like Gordon Brown in control. Well, let's jump forward to 2021 and see what Gordon Brown has to say about the G7.
And on Friday at the G7, we will decide effectively who lives and who dies, who is to be vaccinated and is therefore safe, and who is not to be vaccinated and therefore is at risk. We will decide effectively who lives and who dies. And on Friday at the G7, we will decide effectively who lives and who dies, who is to be vaccinated.
Well, that couldn't be plainer, because, of course, this man absolutely believes what he says. He believes that a group of world leaders protected by a massive amount of police and army and navy and presumably some air force troops are going to decide the fate of the world, and they're going to push forward a vaccine policy for the world population. That's what Boris Johnson has been speaking about. And of course, this is a vaccine, or these are vaccines which are not fully tested. They are still experimental, but these are going to be pushed out across the world. And Gordon Brown is very confident that people like himself, common purpose, chosen future leaders, will be the people making that decision. So I'll allow our viewers and listeners to think about what's really being said there, but we think something deeply sinister is unfolding in the G7 talks. Just remind people that if you go to cpexposed.com website, you can find some of the early documentation where we were warning about this. And on screen at the moment, we've got information about the Common Purpose Project in Washington, DC. And if you research, you will find around that time frame, 2008, 2009, Gordon Brown widely quoting Common Purpose, but also Obama was quoting the same Common Purpose agenda from the other side of the pond. I've got another one here. This is based on an article that was actually sent into the Wheat and Tares PDF. If we bring this up on screen, it was a very simple little article that had been produced, but it was quite informative. It says our investigative journey commences with the examination of a 1953 debate from the House of Lords on the subject of the World Federation. The debate commenced that in the opinion of this House, it should be a fundamental objective of the foreign policy of Her Majesty's government to support and strengthen the United Nations and to seek its development into a, quote, world federation open to all nations and defined and limited powers adequate to preserve peace and prevent aggression throughout the enactment, interpretation, and enforcement of world law. Well, that was pretty good, but they went on here. During the debate, it was recorded that Lord Birdwood said, we're a long way from the day when an Englishman will accept a law framed in Europe on British soil, and yet it is in this more deliberate approach that I see the seeds of eventual success in facing the citizen of the world with a blueprint of a plan, in letting him understand its implications and having its acceptance by common consent with no risk whatsoever of all of us waking up one day to discover that we are subject to an international dispensation which we had neither sanctioned nor understood, seeding the idea of the world government plan into our heads. And then it says here, one world order denialists should note that within the House of Lords debate, Lord Silkin also stated, some of us who are members of the world government movement, as I have been ever since its inception, believe that all this can be achieved through the machinery of the United Nations organization. So we'll let people think about that. But at the end of the day, we've got a very small group of people meeting in G7. They believe that they have sufficient power to enforce effectively vaccination on the world's population, never mind how many people die or who are maimed as a result of that. And as they say in their own words, we will use our presidency to agree an ambitious shared agenda based on our shared values for international action to build back better for all our people.
Yes, but our people doesn't mean the general population.
Indeed, it doesn't, no. So this is a group of elitists protected by the police and the military, deciding what they're going to do with people in the world, complete with their bodies. What are they going to do? Well, perhaps they're going to have vaccines enforced. And I'd just like to remind viewers and listeners that, of course, none of this could happen if we hadn't got the power base there. If we hadn't got the financial power base there within the G7 meeting. If you haven't gone to their website to have a look at the detail of what the financial bigwigs are talking about, recommend that you go and look at this, because, of course, at the end of the day, the people pulling the financial strings will be controlling the debate of the politicians.
Okay, let's come back to the UK alone here, although we are leading the way on this, and Ofcom and the issue of online safety. So they have now today published their Online Nation 2021 report. Here it is. This is an annual report that looks at what people are doing online, how they're served by online content providers and platforms, and their attitudes to and experiences of using the internet. Now, most of the, if not all of the mainstream coverage of this was just basically listing statistics. For example, that 86% of adults in the UK are now using the internet, and they're using it for an average of 3 hours and 37 minutes each day, and that this is the largest or the longest period of any European country, and that they're spending an average of 1 hour 21 minutes a day watching online video services, including social media video services. But while, as I say, most of the news reports are focused on these kinds of stats, I think we need to look at the broader context, because this report is only one of several, because it's part of the Making Sense of Media initiative from Ofcom. This is a program of work, as they describe it, to help improve the online media literacy of UK adults and children. So here we are right back into this issue of online safety, because one of the key tenets of the Online Harms White Paper was that one of the problems with people is that they're not literate with respect to media consumption on the online world, and that they need to be. because otherwise, how do they identify what's disinformation? So Ofcom reminds us that they have a statutory duty to promote media literacy as a result of the Online Safety Bill, which hasn't become an act yet. Understanding on people's online habits, behaviours, and attitudes is a vital part of these statutory duties, and this evidence helps them and others to identify trends and spot emerging issues. There are many ways, they say, to understand and measure online behaviour, each with their strengths and weaknesses. And so they've commissioned 3 reports, which they published today, which collectively address these issues and provide new insights into online behaviour. And they offer a contribution to debates around how to collect and synthesize data, how to understand habits and perceptions about misinformation, and what might be the most effective in countering misinformation. So let's just have a look at this. This is the first one. It's from an organization called Faculty, and it's called Automated Approaches to Measuring Online Experiences. And they say that Ofcom commissioned Faculty, a specialist data science and artificial intelligence firm, to carry out a feasibility study to assess the range of automated online tools and methodologies that measure online experiences. There is strong feasibility for using online tools and data capture and analysis methodologies to research online experience at a scale. So what they're talking about here is mass data collection about people's online habits, about what they're browsing, what they're looking at. One of the statistics that the newspapers were very excited this morning about was the amount of porn that people are watching online during lockdown. But this is taking this level of data gathering and snooping on people's activities to a new level. Such tooling, they say, can significantly improve the scale of data collection for research and can allow the analysis of a wide range of online experiences very rapidly compared with classical social research techniques alone. So they're going to model what we're doing as well as gathering all this data. That's the first report. The second report that Ofcom has published is called Misinformation, a Qualitative Exploration. This study focuses on the opinions of those who define themselves as questioners or rejectors of mainstream media sources and are open to or curious about non-mainstream alternative sources. Now, actually, in some of the documentation on this, they use the term identify as. And so it's become a form of identity politics now to be a questioner of a mainstream narrative or to be questioning the government at all. It goes on to say it explores how they interact with news of information, their perceptions of, inverted commas, truth and, inverted commas, misinformation, and their opinions about some hypothetical interventions designed to combat types of misinformation. So they're basically trying to gather information on what would be the best ways to combat information or the most acceptable ways to combat misinformation amongst those who consider themselves skeptical about mainstream narratives. It goes on to say, sorry, that's a duplication. It goes on. So then let's have a look at the third one here. This says this is from the London School of Economics. It's called Rapid Evidence Assessment on Online Misinformation and Media Literacy. This review by LSE Consulting, led by Professor Lee Edwards, summarizes recent evidence, largely from academic research literature on work being done in the field of media literacy to address misinformation. This is what this is all about. It analyzes 201 papers following an initial sift of thousands. The whole online safety thing is about misinformation, what the government considers misinformation. And of course, the more correct definition of that would be any information which exposes the government narrative for what it is.
Or exposes or even challenges. You might not get as far as being able to expose it, but you challenge it and you're still falling into the trap of these people.
Indeed. So research shows that 3 specific types of media literacy skills, particularly critical thinking, which may involve asking questions where information comes from, or using information to construct evidence-based arguments, evaluation strategies including a reflective approach to one's own status as an audience member, and knowledge of operation of news and media industries have consistently been found to have positive effects on the ability to critically engage with the misinformation. So this is what is driving them at the moment with respect to online safety. It is absolutely misinformation and so-called disinformation, and the fact that the UK government wants to maintain a single narrative. And as you will know, if you've been watching the UK column for some time, at a previous G7 meeting in 2018, Theresa May convinced the other G7 leaders that we might want to have a common narrative at a G7 level as well, and make sure that that is propagated across all the major economies of the world. So if anybody is surprised that the media narrative is the same in the United States, in Japan, in Canada, in Europe, it shouldn't come as a surprise, because they've all signed up to this principle: decide what the narrative is and spread it as far and wide as possible. It doesn't matter what the truth is. This is about narratives. And so if there's anybody generating misinformation, it is governments. Sorry.
I just wanted to bring in, Mike, that on the paper that you had just had on screen, you've got the names of the authors, final report. Can't read them all from here, but it starts off with Professor Lee Edwards. And we'd just suggest to our viewers and listeners that if you go and research the names of these professors, you'll find email addresses for them at London School of Economics. And of course, you can email them and challenge them on the views which they're pushing out as if they've got a privileged position in society. Of course, they haven't been elected. They've simply been appointed to do this job and paid. So probably they're going to produce the message that the government wants in the first place. But if you get their email address or even their telephone number, get in contact with them, challenge them, ask them what they're doing, ask them what happens when there is only government propaganda and no other alternative media.
Now, the BBC Today programme this morning was covering this, and they were very much pushing the issue of child safety in particular. And of course, these documents and the Ofcom report are all there to inform the online safety bill, which is going to be introduced to Parliament very, very soon. Now, we asked on Monday's programme if anybody is interested in this area could get in touch with us, because we'd like to work with a few other people to get to the bottom of this bill and the implications of it, plus everything that we've just presented. Now, a couple of people have been in touch, and thank you very much for that. I've seen your emails, and I will be back in touch with you probably in the morning. But in the meantime, if anybody else would like to get involved in that project, then please do let us know. Now, in a slightly related area, of course, we have looked at the government's censorship network on a number of occasions on this programme, and we're highlighting the connections between, or the close ties, or the fusion, we may say, between the National Security Council and the various intelligence agencies and the Cabinet Office, and all the institutions that the Cabinet Office has set up or enabled to censor and snoop on narratives that are being distributed across the internet. And the one that I want to highlight here is the Freedom of Information Clearinghouse at the end. Now, of course, we can look at who's behind this. Well, we've got Simon Case, who, of course, is Cabinet Secretary, but also looking over his shoulder, you can see there Michael Gove, who is the Cabinet Minister. So why are we putting this on screen? Well, this is actually a bit of good news here, because Open Democracy took the government to court, and the Cabinet Office in particular to court, over the Freedom of Information Clearinghouse. Now, if you remember, this is the department within the Cabinet Office which is there to effectively, if anybody on a particular list makes a Freedom of Information request to any government agency or government department, if they're on that list and they've created that Freedom of Information request, that request then goes to the clearinghouse and it gets answered centrally by the Cabinet Office. Open Democracy took the government to court over this. It's taken them 3 years. And yesterday, the judge, Chris Hughes, found that the documents in the Cabinet Office presented to court about the unit were misleading. He said that there was a profound lack of transparency about its operation, which may extend to ministers. And so he found for Open Democracy in their favour. He criticised the Cabinet Office for a lacuna in public information about how the clearinghouse coordinates freedom of information requests referred to it by government departments and agencies. So just one example, the Cabinet Office had offered to the court an out-of-date Wikipedia entry as evidence that information about the clearinghouse, which circulates lists of journalists, as was said, across Whitehall, was available to the public. So that was the basis of it. And so they've been forced now to give Open Democracy the access to proper documents about this organisation, which they have not yet done, but we will keep an eye on that to see if they do.
Mike, when the lovely David Cameron was in power, we actually had a minister for transparency. If I remember correctly, that was Francis Maude. I don't know whether we still have a minister for transparency. We'll be able to do a bit of research to find that out, but it would be very interesting to know and who that individual is. But of course, at the time that Francis Maude was the Minister for Transparency, there were all sorts of little private meetings going on, attended by Common Purpose, for which the minutes were subtly altered so that discussions that had taken place revealed to the public were not quite the discussions which had actually taken place. So it seems that the lack of transparency continues.
Well, but of course, this is mainly about shutting down, again, any counter narratives, because of course, if you can't get the information that you're asking for, or the information is somehow spun by a central government organization, in this case, the Cabinet Office, then it's very, very difficult to be able to identify the truth in stories that the government is producing. So anyway, let's move on. If you like what the UK Column does and you would like to support us, then please head over to ukcolumn.org/community, and there are options to help us out there. And also on the platforms that are still available to us, if you see any of our material, please feel free to share it.
And just like to say that we are still encouraging people who are watching UK Column for free to come on board and support us as a full member subscriber. We welcome you to do that. And I'd also like to say to the very generous people who say they're already helping to finance UK Column, they are prepared to give more. And our reaction to that is that at the end of the day, the generous people are doing extremely well. What we would like to see is more people coming along and paying that basic £3 a month effectively. So if you're not doing that at the moment, you value what we're doing, we are going to need this financial backing in order to survive when this censorship really starts to bite. So all sorts of things that we're considering at the moment, but the biggest one, of course, is to expand in face of this censorship attack by the government, and that is going to require further financial support. But we would rather see that coming as a little bit from a lot of people than one or two very generous people. So I'll let you think about that. Now, a little bit of sad news. Several people emailed in to say that this lady has unfortunately died as a result of cancer, Rosie Kaur, if I pronounced that correctly. And she'd put out a tweet on her own Twitter page a little while, well, it was May the 22nd. It said, "Please pray for me, my friends. Even though this hard fight we're in, this struggle to direct our lives in a natural, dignified human way, we need to keep our love glowing. Thank you for caring. I'll feel your prayers." So I just wanted to bring that up, a little bit of a poignant thing. And of course, she'd written the book Behind the Green Mask, which was an expose of the globalist agenda around UN Agenda 21. And these are all key things which are now being rolled out through the G7 talks. And every time, of course, you hear the Bank of England talking about the green agenda, the bank is talking about this very agenda which this lady was bravely trying to expose. Now, we've also had an email in about the NHS, which was quite interesting. A person said, I've worked in the NHS in an acute trust hospital for 16 years, and it's been the quietest 2 winter seasons that I've known. It appears busy because of staff shortages. That's very interesting because we've heard a lot about this. The NHS has got a lot of people off sick. It appears busy because of staff shortages and the fanfare complying with the nonsense. I believe they're talking around the COVID pandemic. I run an acute rapid diagnosis service, normally 30 to 40 referrals a week. At the height of the nonsense, this went to 5 a week. This has never fully recovered as people are not wanting to bother their GPs. So that was interesting comment. And this email was particularly interesting because it was a heads up that the grab for our NHS data has now been delayed. According to Big Brother Watch here on screen, the collection will now take place on September the 1st, 2021.
Well,
So,
or it'll begin on that date at least, because I don't think it's ever going to end.
okay. Maybe a glimmer of hope here, but Mike, you quickly said, well, we need to have a look at what the NHS is saying on its own website.
So,
And
yeah.
you were fascinated by the framing of this discussion.
This is appalling, actually. So this is the NHS's page on this. General practice data for planning and research. NHS Digital's daily collection of GP data will support vital health and care planning and research. So what they're intending to do is to gather everybody's data from their GP surgeries and make it available to all kinds of third-party companies. Now, there is an opt-out, which we'll come on to in a second, but here's the key point. Look at what's in the brackets in the title. The acronym for General Practice Data for Planning and Research is GPDPR. This is deliberately chosen, in my view, to appear to be similar to GDPR, which of course everybody recognizes as the EU legislation, which is there to protect people's data and privacy. So what we have here is a really pretty disingenuous attempt to imply that what's going on with this sharing of data by GPs to third-party companies is somehow protecting your data by using an acronym which sounds similar to a piece of legislation at EU level, which is there to protect your data.
This is applied psychology.
Totally, yes, absolutely. So,
well, the next part of this page from the NHS gives you the opting out of NHS Digital collecting your data, and the national data opt-out, and it says at the top of the first paragraph, or sorry, at the center of the first paragraph, this collection will start on the 1st of September.
Right, so the important thing here is that there are two opt-outs required. There's a digital opt-out for NHS Digital, and there's a paper opt-out. You're going to print out a PDF form, fill it in, and give it to your GP. If you can get it through your GP's door, good luck. But anyway, that's what you need to do in order to opt out. It's a two-step process.
Right. Now, several people also sent me this video clip for sale, your NHS data. And it's very interesting because it's this gentleman who calls himself the Black Belt Barrister talking about this data collection and warning about it. However, what he doesn't say is that, of course, under the emergency coronavirus rules, the NHS could do what it liked with the data. That's something you pointed out, Mike. But in the first place, I wanted to say, can we give this gentleman some encouragement? Can we get him delving deeper and using his skills as a barrister as to what's going on here? Because we have been quite tough on the legal profession over quite some time, and we really need these people to step out and start to ask questions, which this chap appears to be doing. So we're going to say, well done in the first instance, but you need to do some more research onto what's really as to what's really happening. Now, this one seems to be a little bit of good news as well. Pulse is reporting that doctors are threatening legal action to halt the unlawful mass GP data extraction. I've put a caption in here, rebellion or hot air, because of course at the moment the GPs have been very reluctant to challenge anything the government does because they don't want to upset their fat pay packets. But perhaps, just perhaps, we've now got GPs starting to smell the danger of what's happening with the massive reorganisation of the NHS.
Okay, now back in May, middle of May or so, we were highlighting the hospital daily occupancy situation and making the point that hospitals are pretty much full. So a couple of graphs here showing that hospitals right across England pretty much full. Well, finally, I'm glad to say the Daily Mail has caught up because we've got a headline today. Dozens of hospitals hit dangerous bed occupancy levels, and in efforts to tackle the COVID backlog, as NHS bosses warn any spike in coronavirus patients could scupper efforts to tackle record waiting lists of 4.9 million. So in the process of admitting that the situation exists, the Daily Mail, of course, maintains the fear narrative by suggesting that the slightest uptick in the number of so-called coronavirus cases could scupper efforts to tackle this waiting list. Now, this 4.9 million people that are waiting for NHS treatment, of course, This isn't something that's happened overnight. It hasn't even happened over the past 12 months. It's been building up for a lot longer than that. Just the fact that the last 12, 14 months has made the situation orders of magnitude worse. Now, the email that Brian just read out, the person was saying that people don't want to bother their GPs. And of course, we're also seeing this massive waiting list. So people sitting in their homes waiting to die. So here's the latest graph from the Office for National Statistics on excess mortality in the UK. And you can see, but remind you once again that in the summer months last year, there was significantly below average mortality last year. And in the summer months this year, Brian, there's below average mortality. But of course, that's all because of the vaccines this year. It wasn't last year because there were no vaccines, but this year.
Sarcasm.
Yes.
Yes.
Same with care homes. We've got below average mortality. Now, there's a caveat on that, which I'll mention in 1 second. But if you look at home, the people that are dying in their own homes, there is still well above average mortality, their excess mortality, people dying in their own homes. That happened all the way through the summer months last year. It's happening through the summer months this year. And this is because people are not getting the medical treatment that they need from the NHS. And in fact, we could go as far as to say that the NHS has utterly failed these people as the managers of the NHS. And I'm not blaming individual doctors or nurses by any means, because they are doing their best in very trying circumstances. But the management of the NHS, having reoriented the NHS to one particular problem, has ignored everybody else. And as a result, we're seeing the result. Well, we're seeing the results.
We're seeing the chaos. Well, let's have a look at this one, which is The Guardian commenting on NHS trusts hiring non-nurses for nursing roles. The Royal College of Nursing says recruiting people without the right qualification puts patients at risk. Well, I would have thought that was a statement of the obvious, but it's apparently not that straightforward. So what's been going on here? Let's look at some of the comments in this article. One trust advertised for a matron, a managerial role usually filled by a senior nurse, to work in acute medicine, but said that a qualification in nursing was not necessary. That's a good one. We need some airline pilots, but you don't need to be trained to fly. This one here, another trust recently sought to recruit a matron who would be responsible for older people's mental health and learning disability services. It said the post was open to a registered professional clinician with demonstrable evidence working at senior level. However, it did not specify that the successful applicant had to be registered with the Nursing and Midwifery Council, which regulates both professions, clearing the way for non-nurses to apply. And we'll give you another one just to ram home what's happening here. Gloucestershire Health and Care NHS Trust invited applications for a nursing role in a psychiatric intensive care unit dealing with people with, quote, serious mental health problems. However, it stressed that the recruit could be a staff nurse, nursing associate, a new role being expanded to help plug the shortfall of registered nurses, or it could be a healthcare assistant. Now, this is obviously breakdown of the system, and we've been hearing over a number of months that there's also been a massive increase in the number of asylum seekers and recent immigrants who are being fast-tracked into service with the NHS. And our stance on this is very clear, that of course those people are being used for a political purpose, which is to help accelerate the breakdown of the NHS. But against that background, that people who aren't qualified are being put in charge of people who are seriously ill, sick within the NHS. Let's bring up Ruth May, who's the Chief Nursing Officer for England. And in the article that we've just shown on screen, this is what she said. Patient care has always been delivered by teams of professionals working together, and with the emergence of more integrated roles, we expect providers to examine the expertise and skills required from a range of professional backgrounds, which ultimately is better for patients. But the irony is here that, of course, what the article was warning about was the fact that these are not professionals because they're not properly qualified for the job. So we thought we'd have a little look into the way that Ruth May thinks as the Chief Nursing Officer for England. And we came across this very interesting little video.
Hello, my name is Ruth. I'm the Chief Nursing Officer for England. 2020 is the year of the nurse and midwife. And I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk about my priorities. I've got 3 priorities: our people, pride and celebration of our professions, and Team CNO. And I want to just concentrate on that last one for a moment. Team CNO for me is about how we speak with one professional voice, our shared leadership, our collective leadership, how we come together to celebrate what we do, to ensure people understand the depth and the breadth of what we do across all sorts of sectors, across health and social care, and about how we promote our nursing and midwifery excellence. For me, collective voice, shared leadership is how we all come together to influence, debate, and to focus on what we want to change. No matter what band you are, shared leadership for me is getting rid of the hierarchy. It's about coming together as a group of professionals from whatever sector, whatever band, debating what's right, debating what we should be doing to change, that transformational change, making the difference for our patients and their families. So there are 3 parts of the Shared Governance Collective Leadership Programme. The first is around local accreditation. Now, I remember when Elaine Inglesby-Burke, the chief nurse for Salford, first started to introduce ward accreditation, and we've seen that now spread across much of England. And so this local accreditation for me is about how we really embed improvements in the nursing and midwifery care that we're giving to our patients and their families. Then, of course, we've got the shared governance, the shared governance councils. And I guess Nottingham have been doing this for the longest. I was only there a couple of weeks ago, listening about the real impact, the real transformational change that colleagues are doing with their patients, with the care that they're providing, the opportunities that they're giving their staff. Fantastic to see shared decision-making councils in practice. So nursing and midwifery excellence is really key, third part of that whole programme. So for me, this all links in really well to my vision as Chief Nursing Officer for England. Really powerful stuff about how we transform care for our patients and our communities, how we lead through transformational change, and how we really celebrate and have pride in our profession. Thank you.
Well, I believe that a few of our audience are stunned after watching and listening to that little clip, because what was that lady really talking about? Now, I think that possibly she's got a hearing difficulty, and we're commenting through that. So if she's got a hearing difficulty and she's got into that position, well done. But there's something not right with what she's saying, because she's not talking about the facts of what's happening on the ground. She's living in this false reality, this false transformational reality. She says that workforce comes first. Well, clearly it doesn't, because we haven't got enough nurses on the job, because so many of them are overworked, stressed, and off sick. And now we're bringing in people who are not professionals, even though she says we're going to celebrate the professional nature of our workforce. But the most frightening thing is the fact that she's talking about one collective voice. If you come into the NHS, presumably you're going to be a drone. You will only do what you're told. You will not complain. And you certainly won't blow the whistle when you start to see patients being damaged by the transformational change policy. So we've got quite a few people at the moment commenting and saying that this lady has been heavily NLP'd. She's been reframed. She can't think about the reality of the world. She's in some spaced out transformational change in the future mindset. And of course, this is the very mindset which is doing the damage inside the NHS. Now, we're going to say UK Column has done a huge amount of work about this subject over the years. We've put up this article many times. We're going to do it again. If you haven't read it, go onto the UK Column website, search for Towards a Million Change Agents by a gentleman called Martin Edwards. A very detailed article. I'll just give you a little bit of it for a flavour, but he starts off by saying philosopher Robert Rowland Smith said that for change to work, the discontent with the present must be greater than the tolerance of it. And he then asks, the author of the article asks, isn't this the perception we are being fed about the state of parts of our NHS? Might this not suggest that it's being deliberately sabotaged from within? And we certainly agree with that. The most damaging failings were illustrated following the 31-month public inquiry into unnecessary deaths at the Mid Staffordshire NHS Trust between 2005. And when presenting his findings, Robert Francis QC told the audience, this is a story of appalling and unnecessary suffering of hundreds of people. Actually, it was tens of thousands of people. They were failed by a system which ignored the warning signs and put corporate self-interest and cost control ahead of patients and their safety. And the report contained 290 recommendations for change across the whole of the NHS. Francis claimed that there was a lack of care, compassion, humanity, and that the most basic standards of care and fundamental rights to patient dignity had not been respected. He also claimed that there was a lack of leadership. Well, we've just given an example of what the sort of leadership is, and the result is people who've died and suffered within the NHS. But UK column going back to 2013 was also warning in a more general sense about how common purpose was being used to drive behavioural change. And this article by Kate Merritt says, do we know right from wrong, or do we need to have our brains reframed to a common belief system of change? And that's, of course, exactly what the Chief Nursing Officer was talking about when she was talking about one collective voice. And if we go on to this one back in 2011, entitled Exploring Euthanasia, the Government Destruction of the NHS, this is a very short but sharp article looking at what was happening inside the NHS, how it was being taken apart, how various hospitals were evidence of the destruction of the NHS. But the article goes on through where are we now? We've got a particular barrister here talking about the current BMA guidelines. In fact, the guidelines do not refer only to patients who are dying. It may also refer to a serious long-term chronic state. What they're getting into here is, while it starts out talking about removing operations for people, he was warning that we were looking at actually taking life support away from people. We're talking about withdrawing food and fluids. And because in the very narrow circumstances of the persistent vegetative state, that has been redefined as treatment. So this is a very powerful article. Encourage you to have a look. And it ends by saying that if we look at what's happening in the UK, we get an uneasy feeling that we're watching exactly what happened during Nazi Germany, or the rise of Nazi Germany in the 1930s, when people were being euthanized because the state didn't think they were capable of adding anything to society in Germany. So encourage people to go to the UK Column website and have a read of those articles.
Now, since May last year, we've been really highlighting the fact that what's been going on in this country is a massive psychological attack by the government using fear. We showed the minutes from the SPI-B subcommittee of SAGE, which explained how they were going to use that fear to drive narratives. Well, I received an email from somebody, and thank you very much for this morning. The email pointed out that cult expert Stephen Hassan developed the BITE model to describe the specific methods that cults use to recruit and maintain control over people. BITE stands for behavior, information, thought, and emotional control. Destructive mind control can be determined when the overall effect of these four components promotes dependency and obedience to some leader or cause. And I thought this was very insightful. I just thought it would be worthwhile running through. So it goes on to say, of course, cults and cult-like behavior is not restricted to religious settings. Attempts at psychological manipulation have been used extensively by various authority structures throughout history to control the masses. Below is a sample of common tactics used by cult leaders. So let's have a look at BITE then and start off with behavior. And some of the things that are listed include regulate individuals' physical reality. Well, that's been done through lockdown. Dictate members' associations, also through lockdown. Financial manipulation or dependence, also through lockdown and the furlough scheme in particular. Restrict leisure, entertainment, vacation time, also through lockdown. Major time spent with group indoctrination. Well, we've just been bombarded with group indoctrination through the BBC and other mainstream media sources. Self-indoctrination, including the internet. For many people, that has been the case. Permission required for major decisions, absolutely. Rewards and punishments used to modify behavior. Lockdown. Are we going to have lockdown? Are we going to come out of lockdown? Are you going to be allowed to travel? Are you not allowed to travel?
Fines.
Fines as well.
Yeah.
Discourage individualism. Do it for your neighbors. Do it for your friends. Encourage groupthink. Impose rigid rules and regulations. Instill dependency and obedience and separation of families. This is the B of BITE. This is all about behavior. This is about how you run a cult. Information, deliberately withhold information, distort information to make it more acceptable, systematically lie to the cult member. Has this been going on in the last 14 months? I think it absolutely has.
Daily basis, Mike.
Minimize or discourage access to non-cult sources of information. I think we've covered that with Ofcom today and the online safety bill. Compartmentalize information into outsider versus insider doctrines. Ensure information is not freely accessible. Control information at different levels and missions within the groups. Allow only leadership to decide who needs to know what and when. Extensive use of cult-generated information and propaganda, misquoting statements or using them out of context from non-cult sources. Then we come on to thought. Require members to internalize the group's doctrine as truth, adopting the group's map of reality as reality, instilling black and white thinking, decide between good and evil. Most importantly, organize people into us versus them, the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated, for example. Use of loaded language and cliches which constrict knowledge, stop critical thoughts, rejection of rational analysis, critical thinking, constructive criticism, forbid critical questions about leader, doctrine, or policy, labeling alternative belief systems as illegitimate, evil, or not useful, and instill this new map of reality again. And finally, emotional, manipulate and narrow the range of feelings so that some emotions and or needs are deemed as evil, wrong, or selfish. Make the person feel that problems are never the leader's or the group's fault. Promote feelings of guilt or unworthiness, and then encourage social guilt, and particularly with respect to how others view you. And I read that this morning, Brian, and I just thought that fits so well with what we have experienced over the last 14 months, that I thought others should see it and consider it for themselves.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, the BBC, of course, master of helping all of that mind control, is now pushing out this, furloughed part-timers clinging on to disappearing jobs. So the basic headline is correct, but of course this is more depressing news that the BBC is giving people. And they've used, of course, an agency to comment. So we've now got an organisation called Timewise that's been talking about redundancy. The consultancy is warning that the UK's 7.8 million part-time workers, most of whom are women, will bear the brunt of job losses when the furlough scheme ends in September. A study commissioned by Timewise found that half of all part-time workers have been furloughed at one point during the pandemic, compared to a third of full-time employees. Meanwhile, part-time employment has fallen at its fastest rate in at least 30 years during the crisis, with the share of women working part-time at its lowest since record began. And of course, many women have to work because it's their income that allow the family to function. So if their money doesn't come in, very often there's not enough coming in with the husband working, and that family is going to fall into dire straits. So this isn't just a part-time job. These are the jobs that actually keep many families in existence, but the BBC doesn't want to talk about that aspect. Now, there was some comment from the Department for Business. Of course, in line with the fact that a cult is running. Nobody was brave enough to own up to who had actually said this, apart from the Department for Business. But the government was wholeheartedly committed to protecting and enhancing workers' rights, Mike. So don't worry, you haven't got a job, you're not going to have a job, many more people are not going to have a job. The government is wholeheartedly committed to protecting and enhancing workers' rights. The department also said that it had set up the flexible working task force to properly understand the changes in ways of working that are emerging as a result of the pandemic. So the way the change is happening, I would suggest, is that people don't have jobs. But they need to set up a flexible working task force to understand that people don't have jobs, and they certainly don't have part-time jobs. They also said they're taking forward plans to consult on making flexible work the default unless employers have good reasons not to. So this is major change of the way that people work. So if you're a company that's very difficult to have your employees remotely working, you're going to go out of business. But if you're Amazon and one of the flavor of the month companies, you're going to be able to rake in billions of pounds. And the BBC wants to really ram down or tighten up the screw now, because here we are with a particularly unpleasant article focused on an organisation which goes out offering free hugs. But what the BBC is doing in this article is seeding the idea that hugging friends and family is absolutely not okay. And well, hugging anybody who's a stranger, I've used the word verboten, is forbidden. But this is almost out of the Nazi party, and the BBC loves it. So sooner we get rid of the BBC, we make it completely flexible, Mike. It disappears.
Yes, that's a very good idea. Okay, well, we're finished early today, but we're going to end with this one. This card apparently was seen in one of the on one of the more popular greetings cards websites, and I just thought everybody would like to see it. We've got 3 people around a cake, a birthday cake there, and the caption is pretty wild how we used to eat cake after someone had blown on it. Good times, eh?
Absolutely. Well, we will end there. We're going to say thank you to everybody for joining us. Are we doing an extra?
No,
I should have asked that.
No, we're dealing with the Vimeo situation, so hopefully everybody has managed to watch the program. I hope you enjoyed it, but I think we've still got some work we need to do on that. So,
Yeah.
So we can't do an extra today.
We'll apologise for today, but we will get back in the swing for that. So we're going to say thank you very much for joining us. A very big thank you to all of our overseas viewers. It's fascinating now to discover that there are people right across the world tuning into the UK column. I've said to several of those people via email that if you send us material about your country and what's happening there, we'll do our very best to get it included into the UK column. So we're based in UK, obviously, but we are very interested in what's happening in other countries, particularly where you can see this uniform agenda expanding across several countries at once. So this is a very important thing to talk about. If you've got information or images or documents or film clips, please send them through, and we'll do our very best to reflect those back to the audience. Thanks very much. We will be back on Friday.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.